Hello and welcome to Arvos of Harvo. Today we are talking about these 5 books, but also just kind of... I know that I don't slump as a person. This channel's been going for 3 years, and each time I managed to read quite a bit each month, but these books for some reason felt more laborious to read than usual, and I wonder if it's just because the circumstances of my life have changed a little bit. I am no longer on the train for an hour every day now. I'm needing to find time in my day to read, and for most of the people I talk to about reading, when they say they can't find the time to read, I think I finally understand that. Is that even though I'm not on the train for an hour, I still have that hour throughout my day, and yet I'm not really reading in that time. I'm doing other stuff. I'm scrolling, I'm tidying the house, I'm doing useful stuff, but it makes reading feel more like a chore rather than something that I kind of just do. So these are good books. I had a really good time this month, and yet I'm not feeling the same kind of accomplishment or surprise or delight at what I'm reading, and I'm hoping that next month things will change. But overall though, if you do want to read, these are all pretty good options. Starting with the Dictionary of Lost Words, it's an Australian novel, and it's one that, okay, maybe I take it back. I like it, but it's a bit of an odd one. So it tells the story of the Oxford Dictionary and of a young girl who is growing up around that time in the scriptorium where they're collecting words and doing definitions, and she's just kind of along for the ride. It's one of those historical novels where they take a young woman with generally quite modern sensibilities regarding feminism and just shove her into a significant part of human history in a way that it would be plausible for her to exist there. And it feels so mean for me to denigrate it that way, but this is also the third book I've read in this style. So we had Year of Wonders, which was about a young woman with very modern feminist values living through the Black Plague quarantine in AM, when I'd read Girl with a Pearl Earring, which is about another young woman, also very modern feminist sensibilities, living in the painter Johann Vermeer's house. And now we have Dictionary of Lost Words. I like the intention. I think I like the idea of making historical fiction and kind of sanding away the edges so that it is a bit more palatable to readers of our modern day values. And I also do like the way that these books force research into the lives of women at this time and force this kind of historical lens that resists the more traditional great man view of history. I think that's all very well and good. And I don't know why I don't like these books as much as I do, but the Dictionary of Lost Words did ring a little bit hollow for me in a sense. I wonder if it's more just the way it focuses on its characters, because we have this full life story of this young girl, and she's growing up in this very literary environment. She's developing this enjoyment of words, and I just felt like she was just the author was trying to make her a bit of everything. She's literary, but not the most. She's part of the suffrage, or she is interacting with the suffrage movement, but not to the greatest extent. She's interacting with lower classes in society, but also not to the greatest extent. And she goes to boarding school, and she enjoys that more refined literary life, but also not to the great extent. It's trying to tour us through all these different parts of English history. And overall, it's fine. Like, it's okay. There's good character interactions, there's good moment-to-moment writing. I thought the dictionary would be structurally a much larger part of the text, but it's not. So when I read The Yield by Tara June Lynch, which is also in its own way a dictionary, that book used its definitions to tell the story, whereas this one, there's really only maybe 3 or 4 words that get discussed in great detail. I think what also soured this for me too was that this was adapted to a play, and my friend was very kind to invite me along to see it. And it's not really a text that adapts well into theatre. It's about a character that spans her entire life, and it interacts with lots of important moments in English history, like World War One, and it's just a lot to try and see on stage. Reading this, I think it benefits from reading more slowly. The prose is really well done, and it's surprisingly fast-paced for a book about 40 years of English history. And the other weird thing I have about it is it's an Australian book by an Australian author about almost entirely English things. And I think that there's this kind of cultural movement to try and make a book like this very emblematic of Australian literary landscapes, whereas it just kind of rubs wrong with me. Like, between this and Jasper Jones and all those other books that are supposedly the titans of Australian literature, they're not really about Australia. I don't know. I find it odd. I give it a 3 out of 5. It's okay. It was a pretty easy read, and I put it in my light reading category. I don't hate my time with it. It was alright. Tender is the Night. So for my yearly challenge, this novel was published in... I'll flick it up there. I don't remember. But it's so hard for me to talk about this book, because it's actually probably one of the most beautifully written books I've read in a long time. The sentences on their own are just dazzlingly gorgeous, and you can flick to any open page and just realize how wonderful some of these images are, and just really, really romanticizing the written word and how the written word represents people and landscapes and all of these wonderful things. But the book just hates people. And I'm starting to learn this about F. Scott Fitzgerald as a person, is that he just has this proclivity towards writing about people that he doesn't seem to like. And he wants to represent their flaws and their shortcomings and give them really tragic endings. I've read The Great Gatsby, I've read some of his short stories, and this is the second of his full novels that I've read. I just don't come away liking any of these characters. And I feel like that's part of the intention, is to show people at their worst and to show vices that tear away at what we might otherwise like about a person, which, if the writing was not this beautiful, it would not be something that I go out of my way to read. And this duality really gets to me. It's like, how am I supposed to feel about this? How am I supposed to read and enjoy and recommend this? I just really don't know. So we follow a young girl named Rosemary. She is a Hollywood actress, and she's 18, and she's holidaying on the French Riviera with Riverina, the French Riverina, and she meets Dick Diver, who is this psychologist whose partner is mentally ill for their society's standards. And so we see the kind of damage this causes on their relationship, where her emotional state is shown as this really horrible burden to the masculine figure. And he's not perfect. Like, Dick Diver does have his own sense of flaws. He is someone who indulges in worldly pleasures too much. He can't really form strong, meaningful relationships. And he is also at a loss to actually properly understand how to care for the people around him. But his wife is shown as this burden, and that's just really hard for me to read, knowing what Fitzgerald's and his wife, Zelda Fitzgerald's life was like. It's really sour. It really, really sours my experience. I can't enjoy the beauty of the language when I kind of know that this is the story behind it. And I just can't stop but feel bad about this whole situation, despite how much there is to learn about just gorgeous, gorgeous writing. It's a 3 out of 5. It hurts. It hurts to read and to think about. It's just so misanthropic. It's just so... No one comes off well. Nothing is gained or learned. Everyone hurts. It hurts. On to lighter news. Timon of Athens, the Shakespeare play for this month, is actually really enjoyable and also very bizarre. So it is technically qualified as a tragedy, and I imagine it's done so because a character dies at the end. But it's not really that tragic. It is just weird. It's really hard to categorize. And I kind of understand why a lot of Shakespearean scholars don't talk about this one very much, because it is theorized to have been a collaborative work to the point where people can actually point at certain scenes and say these ones were Shakespeare and these ones weren't. But if you ignore that and you just read the play for what it is, it's actually a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. So we follow Timon, who is this aristocratic fellow in Greece. He is someone who throws his money around to everyone who's there. So he's a patron of the arts, the patron of government. He's just giving money left and right, and people are asking for favors, and he keeps on giving this money. And we meet this other character named Epamantis, and he is just the sourest individual of all time. He is just such a fusspot. He's a philosopher, and he hates everything. He doesn't believe in joy or fun. And so he goes to Timon's house and observes these parties, and just rags on everything. It's so funny. His dialogue is just hilarious. It's just very satirical. And over the course of the play, Timon starts to lose his fortune. And so he goes to all his friends that he patronized in the past, and yet he can't seem to get anything back from them. And so he ends up in exile. He ends up completely in disrepute. And while he's in exile, he stumbles upon this treasure trove, which again makes him rich. But because he's been so shunned by Athenian society, he doesn't go back. Instead, he just rattles around the countryside, giving money to people who would do weird things with it. So there are lots of strange scenes where he's just discussing the nature of his money and discussing what society should really be. And eventually, this military general ends up taking most of his money to fund a campaign against Athens, and it becomes a big kerfuffle from that. It's really silly. I think that some of the funniest lines I've read in Shakespeare are found in here. Just the insults from Epaminondas is just so bizarre. Like, if you're a Shakespearean scholar who loves the plays for their depth of insight into human nature, there is some stuff to be found here. Like, I find it really interesting the way that Timon is presented as so open and so giving, and that has interesting links to just politics today about government spending and making big promises and how that works. But if I was there to discuss like the nature of the soul and life and death and everything that's in Hamlet, yeah, this one doesn't really have it. It doesn't have clear narrative structures or narrative goals that work well compared to things like King Lear and Macbeth and all of those things that we can learn from. And yet, if you read Shakespeare for entertainment, this play is so entertaining. It's so unusual and bizarre. It goes against what you would expect from the genre, and it keeps you guessing as to whether it's happy or sad, whether it's serious, or whether it's making a joke at itself. It's just a really pleasant reading experience. The only thing I would say is that it does not treat its women characters well. There are a number of Shakespearean plays that are well known for having really great female parts. This one is not one of them. It just constantly makes fun of women the whole time, and that doesn't rub the best in my book. But overall, I would give it a 3 out of 5. I think if you're not the person that's going to read all the Shakespeare plays, then you would never read this, and that's fine. Like, you don't lose anything from not reading this. But I also don't feel like I lost, or I also don't feel like I had a bad time with this. I enjoyed it the whole way through. I was compelled the whole way through. It didn't feel laborious at all, and I was just surprised at some of the jokes that came across. Like, just something 400 years old still is that funny. It's got to be worth something. The Bone People by Keri Hulme is the Booker Prize winner for this month, and this year I'm going to try and finish some of the larger ones. So this one is a bit more than 500 pages. It is a long and, I wouldn't necessarily say dense, but chewy kind of work. What a weird word to say. So we follow really 3 characters. We follow Carolyn Holmes, who is a artist who's reclusive and lives in the New Zealand countryside, and she one day has a young boy named Simon appear at her house. He's kind of this like stray child. They first meet because he's got a huge splinter in his foot, and she takes it out of him because he has this fear of doctors. He doesn't speak, so instead he knows signs and he can write down. Whereas his legal guardian is this Maori man named Joe, and Joe lost his family years before the start of the events of this book, and he's kind of in this free fall state. He's taking care of Simon, but he's not very good at doing that. And he's trying his best. Like, he's a good cook, he can be a caring person on the surface, but he also is very, very violent towards Simon. We get these quite harrowing depictions of violence across this text directed against this poor kid. And the kid is represented as difficult. Like, even from the very beginning, because he's not a biological child, he was just found kind of washed up on the beach somewhere. He does have a hard time adapting to society, going to school, obeying authority figures. It's challenging, and yet the thing that really permeates across this book is the sense of helplessness, is that things aren't right, and none of these characters really have the ability to fix anything. So they're cohabiting together. They go on this big trip to the ocean side where Carolyn's family used to be, and it's a surprisingly fun moment. There's lots of these moments where the 3 just kind of spend time together. They catch food together, they sing, they cook, they just enjoy each other's company. And for the briefest moment, or even, it's not brief, I would say maybe like 300 pages of the book is this, it's pleasant, but it's marred by just how much violence is there under the surface. And it makes it quite hard to read, because you're there and you're thinking, I don't really know how to feel. Everything's so difficult. It's not a case where the book is attacking one thing and supporting another. It's one where everything is messy. The world is messy. These characters are just not able to find their own healing or retribution. and neither is the reader. We're just kind of sitting here along for the ride, enjoying every bright moment where we can, and enjoying lots of bright moments. The countryside is beautiful, the experience they have with one another, they're meaningful, but the real core problem is there, and it's monstrous, and it's just not something that we can come to terms with. And it kind of aligns with what we see of the characters as well, is that if we ignore the problem, if we don't try to fix it, it's still there, it still hurts. And so it's a very painful reading experience. A very controversial Booker Prize winner as well, and I can see why, because the writing style is not that kind of really highly refined, polished style that you would expect from a prize winner. It is a book that was rejected by many, many publishers, and it uses techniques or uses a writing style that is uncommon in literary fiction. It doesn't feel fully edited. Instead, it's very diarized, very in the character's thoughts, uses dialogue in unusual ways, and it has these indented passages where characters are just representing their full thoughts. It's hard to even say what perspective this book is in. It hops around its characters' heads. A lot of this could be chalked up to flaws. Like, I feel like an editor could point at things and go, this is not good. This is not good writing. And yet it works. So I support it. Really, I do. I don't like narratives where authors shun editors and shun the idea of editing their work and go, my writing should never be touched like that. And yet this book does present a good argument for it, is that it's a bit weird, it's a bit unusual, it doesn't really fall into these expected paradigms of literary fiction, and yet the weird parts of it are the parts that I remember, and I think it works well, especially for a story that's going to be this complex and this morally ambiguous. It's totally fine for it to be messy. I think the reader will make of it what they will, and some people will like it and some people won't, but it is worthwhile, it's worth remembering. It's a good book. I give it a 4 out of 5. The Scarlet Letter is the book that I don't want to read and have finished in March. It's fine. It's this giant titan of American fiction that people would study at high school. And it's one of those high school books that I feel like everyone in America would read and no one in any other country would read, because it's so weirdly specific. It's set in Puritan New England, where a woman has a child out of wedlock. She has this baby, and she won't reveal who the father of the kid is. Her actual husband is presumed lost at sea, but really is just kind of incognito in the town, whereas the real father is this pillar of moral support in the community, and so she chooses to defend his virtues by not revealing who he is. And thus she is saddled with the full punishment of it. She is publicly humiliated for about a month, and she's then forced to wear this Scarlet Letter on her dress at all times. And the way that she kind of reclaims it is by embellishing it. So she makes this really beautiful letter, and everyone can see it and knows this for who she is. So the story develops as this child grows up, and we see various characters trying to take action for the injustice that's happened. We have people trying to make right this out of wedlock situation through various methods of revenge and betrayal. Lots of characters have hidden motivations, and it sounds good, like it sounds exciting, but the act of reading it really isn't. So the book starts with 60 pages of what's called the custom house, and that's this almost intrusion of the narrator describing their view on the world. It's pretty boring, I'll be honest. It's just trying to elaborate on what Puritan life is like at this point, to talk about how important morality is in this environment, and it's just not written in an engaging way. Like, I see it's trying to be social realism, it's trying to comment on society, it's trying to be realistic in one sense, and quite pronounced in its judgment of various characters and behaviors in another sense. And so it leads to this labored prose style that's very analytical and doesn't really care about plot pacing very much. Like, I think the plot is still fine, and of the literary novels of this period, it's not one of the longer ones, but the writing style, the sentences are long, the pacing is... You get a lot of chapters where it's just kind of wondering what's going on, and the emotional payoff is not the highest either. And yet it's such an interesting story to talk about. So I feel like if I was teaching this text, I would actually just describe the story to people, and then point out what pages certain things happen, and then draw out certain lines that are really meaningful, because it is a worthwhile story to tell about loyalty, about fidelity, about morality, about societies that condemn people for their past behaviors, and what it means to be truly moral when cultural morality goes against what you really should do in a certain circumstance. I think it's very, very interesting. But it's not interesting. The way it's written is it's not interesting. I think I give the book a 2 out of 5. There's good things about it. And I do get why it's such a big force in American literature. It's a great book to study, but it's a terrible book to read. So, for me, as someone who otherwise would not have read this book, I would give it a 2 out of 5. I wouldn't go out of my way to read it. I think it's genuinely interesting to think about. It's a great footnote if you then intend on making your own fiction or intend on looking at society and history and culture. It's interesting, but it's not interesting. Lastly, The Candy House by Jennifer Egan, the sequel to A Visit from the Goon Squad, which I adored. That was a 5 out of 5 book. It really changed my outlook on humanity and everything, structure, literature. It had a PowerPoint presentation on it. The PowerPoint presentation brought me to near tears. It was just really, really great. The Candy House, I don't know what to expect from this, but I read it because I wanted to. I wanted that same experience that I had with A Visit from the Goon Squad, and it's not quite that. There's some changes here that, I guess, lessen it in my eyes, but maybe it's also the fact that I really didn't know what A Visit from the Goon Squad was when I started reading it. It was a series of connected short stories, and each one had an experiment in form, and it did have some very, very experimental ones. It had news articles, it had that PowerPoint presentation, it has dialogues, it has the recurring motif of rock and roll music. A lot of it came together to just be constantly surprising. And The Candy House, because the sequel is also kind of all of those things, so it has all the same characters as A Visit from the Goon Squad. We see them again. And although we're interested in their lives because A Visit from the Goon Squad is so good, we also have to see these characters in a familiar light, and because of that familiarity, we lose that real sense of surprise that we got from the original. So things change, things are different. I don't think this could ever have been exactly the same as the first book. Expectations have been made, and for what it's worth, I really respect the direction they went in. So there were a few chapters from Visit from the Goon Squad which were set in the near future and hinted at various future social media platforms, and a lot of those predictions were wrong. And I remember mentioning in my review of that book, I was quite impressed at how daring the book was to try and predict the future that was so close and was so distinct and so specific, and to get it all wrong and yet to still be meaningful. Whereas The Candy House, the way that it works is it's written and published in 2022, but it features 2015, 2016 as the main timeline. And instead of Facebook and instead of Instagram being the main social media forces that rise here, instead we get something called Own Your Unconscious, which is a way of sort of like brain uploading, looking at a memory and all the branching technologies that start to exist because of this. And so the motifs and the postures are very similar. There's people who want to get it, people who don't get it, people who are oversharing about it. It looks at the people who make it and the consequences in society that arise because of it, and the way that it can be used for social and commercial and military applications. There's lots of different chapters that kind of just show human beings and all their kind of messy glory, their youth and their growing old and their coming to terms with their role in society. And all of that has, most of this has a present existence of this user unconsciousness thing. And some of these stories work really, really well. Some of the stories actually, I think, just could not exist without such a robust sci-fi framework. And other stories do kind of feel like this is shoehorned in to an extent. Like, they mention it, but then they just go on doing normal human being things. I think it's interesting. I think the motif of technology here is, to me, not as interesting as the motif of rock and roll in the previous book. But I also think that despite being published before ChatGPT, this predicts it really, really well. I think the conversations that it has about technology and artificial intelligence, and about how when things become online, they get shared so much more easily, the ideas of ownership are not the same as before, and the ideas of identity thus change as well, I think it explores it in a really interesting way that feels like she knew what was going to happen. She knew what the world would look like in 2024 and 2025. Even though the specifics of technology aren't correct, I think the much more meaningful way to read this is to try and interpret user unconsciousness as various technological advances, whether it is smartphones or social media or video chat or generative AI. All of these things, I think, become much more meaningful through what this book is trying to do. And I give it a 4 out of 5. I think it just didn't have that kind of explosive, life-changing meaning that A Visit from the Goon Squad had to me. I feel like this book tends to dwell more on its older characters, and I guess the necessity for that is because they had their experiences of being in the 40s in A Visit from the Goon Squad, so a lot of these characters are now in their 60s, and looking back on life and looking back at redeeming the childhood that they had. It's different. It's not as explosive. It doesn't have a PowerPoint. Instead, it has a story written in tweets, which was interesting. It has all these tweets that apparently was published on the New York Times webpage. It has a story written in email correspondence. And both of those are pretty cool, but it's no PowerPoint. It's a 4 out of 5. Alright, 6 books for... 6? 5? 4? 6 books for March 2025. Unfortunately, I didn't get to read a spooky one, and if things continue like this, I feel like I will lapse in my categories a bit this year, which I'm hoping not to do. I really do kind of want to get back on that horse, but when I sit down and read at home, it just feels odd. It feels strange. I don't know if other people have that experience where if you can do something other than read, reading suddenly becomes less desirable. I don't know. I can't really explain it. But it's still very new in this life that I'm in this situation, so we'll see. We'll see. Thank you for joining. And I also have maybe 1 book left from Extension. I didn't want to be doing that video. There's a lot to do. There's so much to do. But at least I'm still getting through some books. So thank you for joining. I'll see you next time.